very ambitious policy, and quite a number of interesting things were also mentioned in the budget by the finance minister. For example, the march talked about cathedral will be, the building of it will be started, and government has said that it will provide some seed money for that. Other interesting things like the Special Prosecutor's Office is now been allocated some 180 million cedis so it can start work and deliver on its mandate. A number of things as well. Agriculture received quite a lot of time because it's important for the 1D1F if that policy is to succeed or see the light of day. The free SHS, as usual, came up for mention, and government also looked at some tax compliance and revenue raising measures. We will look at all these things discussed or mentioned in the budget by the finance minister this morning in our discussion with our guests. Also, we will take a quick dash to the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Communication. Those two entities have been engaged in some issues. That is, the Bank of Ghana refused access to Kelny GVG in respect of some information Kelny GVG required from the mobile money front to help it undertake its revenue assurance job. You remember that government entered into some $89 million arrangement with the Kelny GVG to monitor and assure revenue for the country. We will look at what the issues are and whether indeed there are some breaches of data protection looming on us in respect of the arrangement and the request by the Ministry of Communications to the Bank of Ghana to allow Kelny GVG some data. We will look at all these for you today. You are invited to join the show with your comments via WhatsApp on 0549986996 on social media. Today, the hashtag is NDC Congress. On social media today, the hashtag is NDC Congress. And as I stated earlier, you can look for us on Facebook, follow us and follow the discussion there. And we are live on radio, we are live on TV. My name is Selorm Adonooo. I'll return, do some updates, introduce my guests. We will take a quick dash to Trade Fair to see what's happening there with the NDC Congress. Then we'll start the discussion proper. Don't go away. You're welcome back to the Big Issue. My name is Selorm Adonooo. So now, this week, government has been planning to spend a total of 73.4 billion cedis in the 2019 fiscal year. This is equal to 21.3% of GDP, representing a growth of 27.0% above the projected outturn for 2018. The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, made the announcement in Parliament when he presented a 2019 budget themed a stronger economy for jobs and prosperity.
According to the Finance Minister, the strategic pillars of the 2019 budget are infrastructure, agricultural modernization, industrialization, entrepreneurship, improving efficiency in revenue mobilization, and protecting the public purse as well as social intervention. He pointed out that expenditure on wages and salaries is forecasted at 19.4 billion Ghana cedis, representing about 26.5% of total expenditure. Meanwhile, total revenue and grants for 2019 is estimated at 58.9 billion Ghana cedis, 17.1% of the rebased GDP. By this, government will have a budget deficit of 14.5 billion Ghana cedis.
Capital expenditure is projected at 8.5 billion, equivalent to 2.5% of GDP, and a growth of 55.7% over the 2018 projected outturn. Of this amount, domestically financed capital expenditure is estimated at 3.2 billion, or 0.9% of GDP. An amount of 5.3 billion has been budgeted for foreign finance capital expenditure, and this will be funded by a combination of project grants and loans. Mr. Speaker, based on the estimates for total revenue and grants and total expenditure, The 2019 fiscal operations will result in an overall budget deficit of $14.5 billion, equivalent to 4.2% of GDP.
On macroeconomic targets, government is hoping to achieve an overall GDP growth of 7% in 2019. This is premised on a rebased economy.
Mr. Speaker, data as they end September 2018 show that the economy is in good shape and we are on track to meet our targets. Real GDP grew by 5.4% using the rebase series, 6.8% in the first quarter. In the first half of 2018, compared to the annual target of 5.6%. Non-oil GDP grew by 4.6% compared to the 2018 target of 5.8%. Annual inflation rate declined from 11.8% at the end of 2017 to 9.8% at the end of September 2018, and further, Mr. Speaker, to 9.5% as of October 2018.
Meanwhile, government is projecting crude oil price for 2019 at $66.76 per barrel, in line with the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. The petroleum revenue will hit $1.1 billion in 2019 if the projections are right.
The benchmark crude oil price for 2019 has been projected at $66.76 per barrel, in line with the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, Amendment 2015 PRMA Act 893. The gas price for 2019 is also projected at $3.99 per million BTUs. The 2019 benchmark revenue crude oil output is 63.4 million barrels, 173,764 barrels of oil per day. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry is proposing to this August House to allow it to exclude gas revenues to the tune of $181.8 million from the projected permanent revenues for 2019, as we devise ways of getting DRA to pay for the gas supplied by Ghana Gas. Furthermore, as a measure to minimize the amount of gas produced in the SGN field for power reduction production, government has decided to postpone the extraction of its share of the gas resources, royalties, and carried and participating interest until such a time that we line up off-takers to consume the gas in here. These are prudential measures and should not be misconstrued to mean that the Ministry will not be pursuing the PRS gas bills as required by the PRMA. Mr. Speaker, if this House grants us this request, the projected petroleum revenue for 2019 will amount to $1.1 billion. This is made up of royalties of $227.1 million, carried and participating interest of $602.8 million, current income tax $249.6 million, and surface rentals of $1.1 million.
On infrastructure, Mr. Oforiatta stated that government is committed to embarking on an integrated infrastructural development program across the country that will move goods, food items, and people from one location to another to create jobs and prosperity.
The feasibility studies for the proposed 496-kilometer greenfield railway line from Kumasi to Paka, popularly known as the Central Spine, has been undertaken. Phase 1 from Kumasi to Buapi section will commence in 2019. Mr. Speaker, the following feasibility studies commence and will be pursued in 2019. Rail link on a BOT basis between the Tema Port and Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Development of metro, light rail transit system in Accra and Kumasi, such as the recently signed Accra SkyTrain project. Trans-ECOWAS line from Aflao through Campus to Elugo, and redevelopment of the central line from Kotokou in Greater Accra region to Uni Valley in the Western region. Mr. Speaker, the railway location workshop also at Esicado is being modernized and equipped and will be completed in 2019 to become a one-stop workshop to serve the railway, mining, petroleum, and agriculture industries. We are confident, Mr. Speaker, that 2019 will relaunch the railway system in Ghana after some 50 years of inactivity. Mr. Speaker, we intend to put $1 billion behind this project.
This is the first budget under the Nanado administration that will not be constrained by IMF conditionalities. It is expected that government will have the space to fiscally implement its policies.
Well, so the Minister of Finance also announced a revenue target of 58.9 billion for the year 2019. The figure represents 17.1% of the rebased GDP, which currently stands at 256.7 billion cedis for 2017.
Compared to the 2018 revised revenue and grants targets of 50.68 billion Ghana cedis, the 2019 target of 58.9 billion Ghana cedis represents a 13.96% increase. Mr. Ofori Atta stated that the targeted amount non-oil tax revenue will constitute about 74.2% of domestic revenue and amounts to 42.9 billion Ghana cedis.
A total amount of 18.6 billion has been estimated for interest payments of public debt. Of this amount, domestic interest payments will constitute about 77.8% and amount to 14.5 billion Ghana cedis. Government in 2019 will continue to implement the Earmark Funds Cabinet Realignment Act 2017 at 947 to reduce budget rigidities and create fiscal space to fund growth enhancing expenditures.
On tax relief, the finance minister announced that in keeping with government's commitments to lighten the tax burden of wage earners at the lower levels of the wage ladder, minimum wage will attract no income tax.
We have listened to feedback from across the aisle, and because, Mr. Speaker, to raise the ban to impact monthly income about 20,000 cedis and also at a rate of 30%. Mr. Speaker, we will bring the necessary changes to this August House to the legislature. Mr. Speaker, in view of the recent wage increases, wages around minimum wage levels have become partly taxable. In keeping with government commitment to lighten the tax burden of minimum wage earners at the lower levels of the wage ladder, minimum wage will attract no income tax.
On the tax identification number, Mr. Ofori Atta bemoaned the low patronage and warned that in 2019, governments will begin to apply sanctions to states and private entities that fail to enforce the TIN requirements.
The need to broaden the tax base has never been lost on us as a country. Some efforts have been made even under previous administrations, but too many individuals and businesses still operate outside the tax net. This challenge calls for more creative strategies and new approaches to achieve the needed results. In 2009, we will do the following. Tax identification number. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, we will do the following. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, the Revenue Administration Act 2016 lists many services and transactions that cannot be accessed by individuals without tickets. Unfortunately, compliance with these requirements have been low. In 2019, we will begin to apply sanctions to state and private entities that fail to enforce these TIN requirements. Additionally, government, in providing social services and benefits provided by the state, will require beneficiaries or their guardians to have a TIN. These will complement the current efforts by GRA to get more persons and businesses on this radar.
Meanwhile, the finance minister stated that in 2019, governments will make use of third-party data sitting in various databases in both private and public sector for tax administration purposes.
Use of third-party data. Mr. Speaker, the National Identification Scheme fully deployed will provide government with a database to help with revenue administration. But even before that, and to add to the benefits from the NIA, we will in 2019 make use of third-party data sitting in various databases in both private and public sector for tax administration. The DVLA, the Land Registry, the courts, the financial institutions, the law enforcement agencies, SNCs, to mention a few, are all repositories of useful tax data. We will use these databases to rope most persons into the tax net and tax them accordingly.
All right, so the textile industry is also expected to see a major boost next year with the implementation of the zero-rate VAT on the supply of locally made textiles. This is according to the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. According to him, government will extend the tax stamp policy to the textile products and also give a zero-rate VAT on the supply of locally made textiles for a period of 3 years to help revive the industry.
Ghana, Mr. Speaker, we used to have a textile industry that employed around 30,000 people. But in recent years, the industry has fallen on hard times, and now the number employed is only 5,000. It is government's aim to revive this industry, which could be a big source of employment. So in order to curtail smuggling and counterfeiting, which have been undermining the industry, we will extend the tax stamp policy to the textile products. Further, to make industry price competitive, government will zero-rate VAT on the supply of locally made textile for a period.
All right, so Ken Ofori-Atta further revealed that government will launch the livestock model for planting for food and jobs called the Rearing for Food and Jobs. The program is aimed at increasing the production of selected livestock, especially poultry. Explaining the reasons for this, the finance minister said it is also a way of reducing the large importation of food.
We plan, Mr. Speaker, to expand the program to cover 1 million farms. Never before, Mr. Speaker, in our history, since the cocoa industry, have we given so much prominence to our farmers. In 2019, government will launch the livestock model of planting for food and jobs called Rearing for Food and Jobs, with the objective of increasing the production of selected livestock, especially poultry.
Meanwhile, economist Dr. Butexin has lauded infrastructural initiatives outlined in the 2019 budget, describing them as timely. Prior to the budget presentation, some government officials have stated that the budget will be used to close the infrastructural gap in the country. Reacting to the budget after the finance minister presented it in Parliament, Dr. Texin stated that the most critical thing is how government will seek funding to implement the plan.
Some of the items that caught my attention had to do mainly with the railway infrastructure. I mean, it's quite exciting that we've started some feasibility studies on constructing a rail line from Tema to Burkina Faso, which for me as a trade economist is good, because what it then happens is that we are going to have a lot of transit goods from abroad going to Tema to Burkina Faso. Also, the ECOWAS transit from Aflao to Elubo. Now, these are all huge infrastructure projects that we need to find resources to build. Because once we are able to build this, not only will it serve as a very good means of movement within our economy, but it will also attract a lot of investment into the economy. I mean, we are talking about 1D, 1F. And I'm happy the minister mentioned that most of the firms that have already started are adding value to agricultural produce and producing what we're importing. So like I said earlier on, that is the way to go. We need the import substitutes for us to reduce our reliance on imports.
So you heard and saw Dr. Ebo Texin of the University of Ghana Business School there. Still on the budget, the Ghana Union of Traders Association is unhappy government did not reduce some duties at the ports to help reduce their cost of business. Speaking to City News, a co-executive member of GUTA, Benjamin Yeboah, said they are disappointed.
What we were expecting were not made known to viewers, but I mean, we're hoping to hear something on our duties, the duty rates, because we think that it's still quite on the very high side, because it's still hovering about 50% plus of CIF value, among the highest in the world, which is just too high. Since we are still importing, we thought something should have been done about the duty rates. Nonetheless, like my brother said, government is still looking for more revenue to take care of all the very ambitious program that he is embarking on. And therefore, I'm sure that might be why.
All right, so you heard and saw Benjamin Yeboah, who is a co-executive member of GUTA. This is the big issue coming to you live from our studios at number 11, Dr. Martin Loop in Adabraka in Accra. Today is a big day for the NDC. They are electing their national executives who will help the party in their quest to recapture power in 2020. And some of the contests have been particularly interesting. The General Secretary one, for example, and that of the chairman, and even the National Communications Officer. We will spend some time and do some analysis on this, and I'll force my guests to make predictions, as it were, in respect of the various races. The hashtag for today is NDC Congress. So if you are contributing on social media, your hashtag should be NDC Congress, and then we'll read the comments to the rest of the world. I'll return quickly and introduce my guest, and we'll delve into the discussion proper. Don't go away.
Get the backstory of the major news stories on press conference. Hear from the editors and the reporters behind the biggest stories of the week.
The university needs to think and reconsider. There are women who are in our universities who have been sexually molested for grades. That doesn't matter.
Press conference every Sunday at 9 p.m. with Duke Mensa Opoku, only on City TV. Wherever the weekend sporting action happened, we will bring it to you here on Scorecard. Every goal, every dunk, every punch, the winning strides, and the winning volleys.
International media, he said, look, wait, sit and wait. Let me have a meal with my people. And I think that's the same cool, it's the same organization he brings to the field every time I've seen him play. He looks to me like somebody who has played over 50 caps already. Okay. But this guy has barely played over 25 caps for the national team.
All of the weekend's action in one place. Scorecard every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. prompt on City TV. City TV is live. City TV is a free-to-air digital channel. On a digital TV, please press menu on your remote control and run a news search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access City TV on your television. City TV can be accessed on a multi-TV digibox. Tune into City TV and experience your world. City TV, it's your world.
Live music, interviews, poetry, and more with your favorite personalities. Be our guest on Saturdays from 2 to 4 p.m. for the most exciting moments on TV. Join Kojo Akoto Boateng for real entertainment right in your living room. Saturday Live on City TV and City 97.3 FM.
You're welcome back to the Big Issue. We are live on 97.3 City FM. My name is Selorm Adonooo. My guests for this morning are Toma Emihie, who is a business journalist and analyst and editor of the Go Street business newspaper. Franklin Kujo, founding president of Imani Africa. Sydney Kesley Hayford, member of Occupy Ghana. We will want to dash to the trade fair venue where the NDC is about holding their 9th Delegates Congress to elect party executive, national officers of that party. And my colleague, Pearl Akanya Ofori, is on the line to bring us some updates on what the happenings, have been or are so far at the trade fair venue at La. Hello, good morning, Pearl. Hello, good morning, Pearl.
Is it possible to call me on my line?
Well, it appears Pearl Akanya Ofori cannot hear me, but we will try and re-establish connection with her. But what is happening is that the NDC, as we speak, that party is gathering at the Trade Fair Center in Accra for their 9th National Delegates Congress. And this Congress has been seen by many as one that will largely impact the NDC's quest to recapture power in 2020. It's not clear which one influences what. Others have said that this particular Congress will impact the flag bearership race, which comes subsequent to this. Others have also said it's the other way around, because it is the flag bearership race and some key actors in that race that is actually shaping, or that will actually shape who wins this particular one. But I mean, by close of day or by close of tomorrow, I'm sure we will get to know. And there are some names running for the various positions. National chairman, for example, we have Mr. Hudu Yaya, or Alhaji Hudu Yaya, who has been a long time general secretary of the party, one of the most decorated general secretaries of the NDC. We have Danny Annan, the former Greater Accra regional chairman of the party and the vice chairman of the party as we speak currently. We also have people like Betty Maud Idrisu, who is a former Attorney General of the country, indeed the first female Attorney General of Ghana, and she went on to become the Minister of State, the Minister in charge of Education, and before that she was the Director of Legal Affairs at the Commonwealth Secretariat in the UK. Before that, she had done a lot of work in gender activism, and indeed she is an intellectual property lawyer, quite a decorated personality also there. We also have Dan Abudakpi, a former Minister for Trade and Industry under Jerry John Rawlings' government. Very successful politician as well. He was a member of Parliament for Qatar until he was incarcerated in the early 2000s for some roles he played in the Aveime Rice project and a few others. He was later granted pardon, I think, by President John Agyekum Kufuor. We also have Samuel Ofosu Ampofu, who is a former Minister for Local Government and Rural Development. Before that, he was Minister for the Eastern Region and a former former national organizer of the National Democratic Congress. Before that, he was also MP for Fantiakwa, also a very successful politician there. I mean, his name when he was the national organizer was Iron Boy, and indeed he did do a lot of work getting the party to government in 2008 when President, now late, Atta Mills won that runoff, that keenly contested election to become president of our dear country. Let me try and see if I have Pearl Akanyofori on the line so we can speak to her to help us gauge the mood there. No, I do not have Pearl. So the General Secretary position is one that, you know, has gotten many people talking. Koku Anyidoho, the vibrant and younger Koku Anyidoho, is coming up against a colossus, the institution himself, Asiedu Nketia, who has been in the role for the past 12 or 13 years. Indeed, Asiedu Nketia is credited as the man who did a lot to help the party win the 2008 election, which brought the NDC back to power when Professor Mills was their candidate. He went on to win again as General Secretary, and he won again. And this time round, he is facing the contest, or is facing a hot chase, if you like, from his deputy, Koku Anyidoho. Koku Anyidoho is a deputy general secretary of the party now, and he wants to step up and go for the jugular. So he is giving his boss, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, a good run for his money. And we understand he's been campaigning so much around the country. His close associates tell me for the past 8 weeks, he's not been in Accra, he's not been home. He's been in the woods campaigning, because they say that if you want to defeat Asiedu Nketia, you really need to work hard. And indeed, the interesting thing is that Asiedu Nketia himself, in previous elections, you know, had not really campaigned. But we see Asiedu Nketia meeting constituency executives, you know, on radio, at other places, campaigning to retain his seat, which tells us that he is indeed feeling the heat from the bull, that is Koku Anyidoho. You remember Koku Anyidoho recently was, should I say, arrested by the police in certain comments he made recently in respect of the Ghana-US military agreement, and he was questioned by the CID for a day or two or so, and that led to the massing up of NDC supporters at the CID headquarters. That incident was a heated one, and he was eventually released and eventually discharged, if you like. So it's been an interesting one. Another race that is keenly contested is the National Communications Officer position, which is between Fred Agbanyo and newly minted lawyer Sami Jemfi. Fred Agbanyo is the current deputy National Communications National Communications Officer, and he wants to step up and go for the top job, which is the communications officer job itself. And Sami Jemfi, who is a member of the communications team of the party, is also campaigning very hard to take that position. So it's a keenly contested race, and we wait to see by end of day, today or early tomorrow, who will really win that race. Other positions like the organizer slot of the party is also being contested by a number of people. Notable among them include Anita Dusoso, Baba Jamal, Akamba, Joshua Akamba, and the Kamba kid, who is Yao Boating Jan, Solomon Kansa, who is the current National Communications Officer, and a number of other people, and Enoch, and quite a number of people contesting that particular race. And we'll give you updates on happenings at the trade fair ground shortly. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll link up with our guys at trade fair. So we take a quick break. This is a big issue coming to you live from our studios at number 11, Dr. Multiloop in Adabraka in Accra. Don't go away. All the updates for the Congress, you have them here, and all the analysis on the budget and all the current affairs matters. You know, you have them here on 97.3 City FM and on City TV. My name is Selorm Adonooo. We will take a quick break. We will return, and then we will touch base with the guys. Don't go away.
City TV is live. City TV is a free-to-air digital channel. On a digital TV, please press menu on your remote control and run a news search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access City TV on your television. City TV can be accessed on a multi-TV digibox. Tune into City TV and experience your world. City TV, it's your world. Get the backstory of the major news stories on press conference. Hear from the editors and the reporters behind the biggest stories of the week.
The university needs to think and reconsider. There are women who are in our universities who have been sexually molested for grades. That doesn't matter.
Press conference every Sunday at 9 p.m. with Duke Mensa Opoku. Only on City TV.
Live music, interviews, poetry, and more with your favorite personalities. Be our guest on Saturdays from 2 to 4 p.m. for the most exciting moments on TV. Join Kojo Akoto Boateng for real entertainment right in your living room. Saturday live on City TV and City 97.3 FM.
Wherever the weekend sporting action happened, we will bring it to you here on Scorecard. Every goal, every dunk, every punch, the winning strides, and the winning volleys.
International media, he said, look, wait, sit and wait. Let me have a meal with my people. And I think that's the same cool, it's the same organization he brings to the field every time I've seen him play. He looks to me like somebody who has played over 50 caps already. Okay. But this guy has barely played over 25 caps for the national team.
All of the weekend's action in one place. Scorecard, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. prompt on City TV.
Hi, you're welcome back to the big issue. My guest this morning, Toma Emihe, editor of the Gold Street Business newspaper. Franklin Kujo, president of Imani Africa. Sydney Kisley Hayford, member of Occupy Ghana. Guys, good morning. Very interesting budget we saw over the week. Kenneth Furata did his best to read that lengthy statement, close to 4 hours. But what were your immediate takeaways, Toma?
Well, it has answered one big question I've been waiting to have answered for the past 2 years, and that is government's commitment to moving from taxation to production, as it claimed, which means basically moving towards supply side driven expansionary economics rather than demand management, which is what the IMF insisted that Ghana do, and which the Mahama administration applied from April 2015 until they left power, and which this government inherited, made clear is opposed to, but has followed it all the same. Now the IMF is going, we are now actually seeing that indeed there's a change of tack. Basically, the idea, supply side economics is basically, rather than reduce demand, national demand, to come down to the level of where our supply is, as in what the IMF always proposes to its clients' countries. What the Akufo-Addo government aims to do is to try and increase supply to the level of where demand is currently. Okay, that is a very basic, it's a very large difference. And at the same time, of course, you still need to continue with fiscal consolidation. So it requires a juggling act. So what the government has done is to play a fast one, so to say. Look, fiscal consolidation has stopped for now. The fiscal deficit target for 2019 is 4.2%, which appears to be slightly lower than the 4.5% target for 2018. Okay. All right. So it looks as if, yes, fiscal consolidation is continuing, but at a much slower pace. All right. But the fact is that it's not like that at all. We have rebased our economy. Which has increased the size of the economy by about 26% in terms of GDP. Now, if you take the rebased economy in size and calculate the fiscal deficit target for 2018, what you get is 3.7%, not 4.5, which means that is the size of the economy which has been used to compute the target for 2019. So effectively, what's happening is that the fiscal deficit target, using uniform figures, that is the rebased economy figures, is actually increasing from 3.7% in 2018 to 4.2% in 2019. Okay, and that is just one of several things which shows that, true to its promise, government intends to shift towards supply side economics. That is what they call production rather than taxation kind of thing. But there are some very clear, there are some dangers in that. Okay, first of all, the same rebasing has supposedly given government the opportunity to increase its public borrowing again, and government is taking that opportunity. However, I mean, first of all, let's look at those figures. You know, the public debt to GDP ratio, which is the way we normally measure our debt sustainability here, peaked at 73%, I think, sometime during the Mahama administration, and since then it's been falling. Now the rebasing has allowed it to fall sharply to about 54-55%. Okay, which now means, I mean, it's supposed to mean that means that government has some more room to borrow because the economy is bigger than we thought. The problem there is that ratio is deceptive. What should be of practical importance to us is not our debt relative to the size of the economy, but our debt servicing obligations relative to our revenues. That is what that determines whether we can pay our debts or not. All right, and the rebasing of the economy has not immediately changed that ratio. It's still about 42%. Okay, it's still about 42% because both the numerator and the denominator, neither one is size of GDP. Okay, so when you now use the size of the rebased economy to increase your borrowing because you feel you have more space, the debt to GDP ratio has improved, you now incur more debt servicing obligations. But the real important measure, that is debt servicing obligations to revenue, your ability to pay, has not improved. So now, when you now take on more borrowing, it worsens. And already, we've run out of space. Look, about 40% of our tax revenues goes on debt servicing. Statutory funds where it's been capped at 25%.
So interest payments or debt servicing, statutory payments and compensation
to
when
workers.
You put this together,
when you put it together, you're very close to 100%. Yes, so when you now increase your borrowing again because you feel you have more space because your public debt to GDP ratio has improved, what happens is that you're running possibly over 100% when you're looking at the real measure. That is your ability to pay based on how much you are required to pay against how much you are earning. Okay, so that is where the danger is. So now, what it means is that, for practical purposes, if you are going to increase your debt servicing obligations by increasing your debt stock, you must have either of two things. Either what you are borrowing for should be self-amortizing, which means it pays its own way in terms of paying off the debt, or your tax revenues increase enough to cover the extra spending. All right. Now, the rebasing has reduced our tax to GDP ratio to 12.5%, which is just about half of the average for our peers, lower middle income countries, which shows that we're not getting enough tax revenues. And government is taking...
The IMF actually mentioned that as one of the difficulties.
Yes, it's a very, very major thing. I mean, the average for lower middle income countries around the world is between 22 and 25%. Ghana is doing 12.5%.
That's not good enough.
We should be earning twice as much tax revenue. Government is taking steps to increase tax revenue. Let's face it, paperless POS, CTNs, tax stamps, all these things are all about, increasing the tax revenue. There's the issue of how much of the increased tax revenue is based on deepening the net and how much is based on broadening the net. What we need is to broaden, not to deepen. Okay. But either way, for the sake of this, what I'm trying to explain here, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is tax revenues are supposed to go up. Okay. But we know that overnight we cannot achieve that kind of increase, a very, very large, substantial increase overnight. And meanwhile, the borrowing is going on. This year, 2019, 1.5 billion for educational infrastructure. We're going to do about 3 billion euro bonds. The borrowing now the increased borrowing is about to take place. Okay, so definitely it's going to affect your debt obligations to tax revenue ratio adversely. Okay, so tax won't cover it. All right. Now, for the 1.5 billion we're taking for educational infrastructure, it's going to be backed by VAT receivables. That is the get fund aspect of the VAT breakdown. Okay. But since those figures will not automatically increase overnight, what it now means is that when we start drawing down that 1.5 billion, there are some things we have been using get fund for. We will no longer be able to afford because that money is now going to paying off or servicing the 1.5 billion education infrastructure money we're about to take. The other thing there again is that the other thing is that if you can't increase your tax revenues to match the increase in debt servicing obligations, then the project should be self-amortizing. I know that some of the projects we do are self-amortizing. It proves that borrowing per se on its own is not bad. It's how you use it. I mean, look at the money we borrowed for Atuabo with the gas thing and see how well it's working for us. Okay. But, for example, let's take I'm particular about the educational infrastructure. Already, I think that the free SHS thing is not the soundest policy. All right.
It's not the soundest policy.
Yes, in terms of making it free for everybody, as against making it free for people who can't afford to pay. But that's a different argument. But the bottom line is that it has seriously increased intakes. And we've run out of infrastructure because we didn't have any money left for infrastructure. So now we're going to take the 1.5 billion to increase the educational infrastructure. But you see, this is a case of now, it's another loan. It's a loan which does not increase our capacity to service the loan. I mean, if education, it's a good thing, but
it's social, not capital.
It's social, exactly. You understand? So now we're going to take on another big loan related to the same senior high school, free senior high school policy, which is going to put pressure on the coffers. And let's not make any mistake about this thing. the cedi depreciation this year is very instructive. Yes, it is true that the strengthening of the dollar because of gold price and the increase in interest rates by the Federal Reserve Bank in America, it's true that those things have strengthened the dollar and caused the cedi to fall. That is true. But what about the other major reason? The other major reason is very simple. If you look at your capital accounts, is that we are really beginning to feel the pinch in terms of our debt servicing, especially our foreign debt servicing. Don't forget that, one, we've been moving away from domestic financing to foreign financing because the rates are cheaper and we need the FX. Okay. Not just foreign borrowing now, now the new government has started doing Eurobonds like what the Mama government did, but also increasingly, longer term domestic debt is actually foreign exchange debt because we're going to pay back. When we pay back, the guys brought in FX and they're taking it out as FX. They will convert their cedi proceeds to foreign exchange when they're taking their money out. So that again is putting pressure on the cedi. And that is the major cause of the reason why the cedi has depreciated more this year than last year, despite the fact that our trade surplus is getting even better. So we need to watch that. Our foreign exchange exposure, we need to watch it in terms of our debts.
Very well. I just wanted your initial comments on it, but you've delved into the meat of the discussion, Prof. But that's fine. Let me go to Franklin to take his view on it and to ask him, whether he's been impressed by the output of the government so far on the back of the 2018 budget and what he thinks of what he heard the finance minister say last Thursday. Franklin.
Well, good morning to yourself. And,
morning. We missed you last week.
As well. Yes. Good to be back. Just to say that, well, the season of accounting, isn't it? And as usual, this is a bit different because, as Toma has clearly stated, we are seeing the back of the IMF, hopefully for good, as has been touted by the finance minister and the government itself. So it was expected. In fact, not long ago, I think there was a deputy information minister who sat the very seat Toma is sitting, who said that 2019 will see expansion in infrastructure. In fact, when we stepped out, he said everywhere there'll be carpenters and
various artisans
will be at work. So it is expected. There's every good thing to decide about infrastructure, really. Of course, it has to be infrastructure that can last the test of time. But having said that, I think the budget seemed to have placated a number of the House. Some of the issues people raise, especially the middle class, when you look at the band, the taxation band, which incidentally would capture quite a lot of the politicians, by the way, so they get to escape. So that's one. I think also that the business environment largely seemed to have improved a bit. Of course, we need to talk about the downside to it, which is the price hikes and all of that, in spite of the fact that the inflation is still single digits. But overall, I was impressed when the World Bank Doing Business Index ranked us 114 out of 190 countries. In itself, not necessarily a big achievement, because we had been plummeting actually. From 2015 we were 108, 2016 we were 112, 2017 we were 120th, and now we're 114, which is good. It tells you that some of the interventions at the ports, the trade facilitation interventions, are helpful, and I think that we need to pursue those aggressively, because as we speak, in spite of the paperless ports, about 88% of the charges at the ports are not related to the services that are provided. And I think when we try to calibrate some of these interventions further, it's most likely that we would be inching a bit higher up on the index. So I thought that was quite good news too. And it's good to build on that because clearly at the end of the day, registering a business and paying a tax and seeking construction permit as against registering property are actually these vital ingredients in determining the business proficiency of a country. What was curious though was that on the index, we didn't particularly do well on enforcing contracts, which again speaks to the issues about business reform. In fact, I was mortified to see that Somalia, which was the 190th country, actually they chopped last on the index, but beat us in enforcing contracts. From one, they were 114th, we were 116th. It's not so big, but you know, when I saw that, I said to myself, I think a friend of mine asked me, well, why is that? So maybe Somalia enforces contracts with guns. So possibly maybe the reason, but it speaks to some of the steps we are taking in order to, as it were, revise the economy. Doma has spoken at length about the watchword, which is be careful how you spend. I think it's important. If you look at the petroleum revenue that we got almost 100% increase. By the first half of this year, up from January to September, we are down almost 720 something million dollars from oil. But that compared to last year, it was about 320, half of that. And so it shows that we, of course, the prices in oil actually helped us as well. But if you look at the expenditure side of it, about 49% of the ABFA has actually been utilized, which makes us think that we might be falling back into the same trap before the current government came into office. Now, what is curious is that of the 49% that has been utilized as well, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act is not being actually respected. If you take a closer look, you realize that instead of 70% of the allocations going to critical infrastructure, you have just about 1.6% going to health, 23% going to roads, railways, and other infrastructure, and about a staggering almost 69% going to education for the purchases of goods and services, but not infrastructure, something Toma was actually talking about. So while it is good to be looking for money, and even the ones you have to be applying it as well, you've got to be serious about the way you actually apply the funds, so that at least there should be some return on some of the investments that you make. I mean, education is important, and the social intervention, should I say, hallmark or achievements of this government may be legendary, simply because there's an attempt to fulfill a particular problem, which is the free SHS, which is a useful thing, by the way. But it looks as if we are making investments into something that we haven't properly quantified yet, apart from rolling up numbers. I mean, of course, it's not for me to say. I mean, the data is all out there for everybody to determine that the qualitative improvement in education is not being felt at all, in spite of what the finance minister believes, that the more educated people are, because they run through a system, the education will not be passing through them, but they will just be passing through the educational systems, which is very important. So some people have asked that, if I'm a business person and I'm being taxed in order to support free SHS, I should be able to calculate with my government the value in return. Will these persons, when they graduate, be productive to me?
But is that not a given? If they graduate, they are certainly better than people who haven't gone to school at all.
Without getting into
don't have secondary education.
Getting into the debate, because this is a huge topic by itself. Something we hardly do in this country, by the way. We never look at the unintended consequences and the consequences, the long-run effects of policies. So in other far-seeing countries, and I use the word advisedly, because these countries beat us anyway when it comes to science and maths. Not long ago, your free SHS students went to a test somewhere. They couldn't even identify some of the equipment, right? But these were the brightest who won the National Science and Maths quiz. It's an example of the things you're saying. So, look, overall, the point I'm making is that whatever interventions are being made financially, they must be productive. That's the point. I was also curious to note that on the energy side, which I think my colleagues at Imani have done a yeoman's job in trying to analyze that sector, we were told that there's almost 5 billion city energy sector levies had been taken care of. Unfortunately, we didn't see any updates in the 2019 budget, which is also a bit curious. What is also interesting was also the case that the government appears to suggest that until off-takers are found for some of the gas resources, government is going to postpone its part lifting, and that's almost $181 million, which we have to forgo simply because we are waiting for off-takers. But there's a proviso, which is the caveat rather, that because of the debts that are piling up, there's a need probably to wait and take care of those debts before. But the challenge though is that if we wait for the debts to be taken care of, what happens to the players like Sony, those who use these gas resources, who would need the resources anyway, right? I mean, I think it is important to do a perfect balancing. There's a balancing act that ought to be done between debt management and debt restructuring, which I suspect is the gravamen of the matter, really. I also think that on the way we utilize some of the revenues as well. If you look at the IPEP, the Infrastructure for Poverty
Eradication Program or something.
Okay, so sounds like one of those terms during the 80s. But if you look at allocations to that sector, there's no proper value for money. Should I call it? Audit that is to follow. I mean, building toilets, 10-seater toilets around the country and 1,000 metric ton.
But it's an important social amenity.
No, nobody is saying so. We are just talking about these. Don't forget, others have questioned whether the funds are actually being utilized properly. I mean, the point to make again is that whereas you are probably getting resources, however minimal they are, you ought to be careful the way you handle them as well. One of the subjects that the minister spoke about, which obviously caught my attention, was on protecting the public purse, which is a very useful thing to do. I mean, look, in spite of the allocation of 180 million to the special prosecutor, which is a very big governance win, because in spite of we've made a lot of noise about the Office of Special Prosecutor. He himself was getting fed up. The 180 million cedi allocation is a big step, and the government ought to be credited for that. What I'm not able to reconcile with this big step is the noticeable, if you like, attempt to not necessarily manage revenues properly. Because if I see the allocations, as I've suggested to you already, through the ABFA, I don't get the indication that we'll do so prudently. Which means that we should also be careful how as we are expanding infrastructure, we should be careful how we utilize the funds. Let me just say that on procurement, which is this economy is a procurement economy, in spite of what the finance minister suggests, that there's been savings, and I don't even know how they do those calculations. Savings against what? They make the point that under Mahama there was no savings, but what are you comparing?
I don't appears to be the benchmark.
Yeah, so but there's nothing of the sort. I mean, the fact that there was no performance report of how procurement went is not the basis, because you must be comparing like for like in a way. By the way, if you suggest that you've saved people, you've saved the economy some amount of money because of your better procurement practices, which, by the way, is questionable. You don't even know how to calculate.
For example, if you are building a 6-classroom block, you sole sourced it and it cost you maybe $100 million or 100 million cedis, if you like, and now you open it for competitive bidding.
You've seen those beats. Have you seen those beats? Have you ever seen proper beats? We've been doing some extensive work on the.
So you mean to say the competitive bidding is not proper?
Please.
Or the winner is known before the bid itself.
But we saw the procurement processes leading to Kelly. How symbolic that was. I don't want to get into that conversation. But let me end on this. Okay, I'm ending on procurement.
Okay.
You'll be mortified to learn that the procurement thresholds that are being proposed right now by the PPA would virtually bring these countries down on its knees. If you've seen, and I've seen the figures, I've sent it to the one of the Deputy Minister of Finance, that they should never approve those sums. Because one, we don't even have enough procurement experts. People go and do purchasing and supply and pass as procurement experts. They try to, and if you see the threshold, you'll be shocked. I'll show it to you, Sydney.
But you have a whole ministry now for procurement.
But that is the challenge.
That should help
so
streamline.
Maybe, yes, and we'll be telling them as well. What I'm suggesting is that the PPA is making propositions to the board and ultimately to the finance minister that there are new threshold for approving services that are procured, and there are monumental jumps. It's like double figures. And it's really, really worrying. Anyway, these are some views that I think I'm sharing.
Your opening remarks have been very long. Sydney, I guess you listened to the budget, you followed it, and so what are your takeaways? This being the post IMF budget, did the minister or did the government cover everything? The plans in the plans he outlined, did they appear like plans which will help us manage our own economy now that the IMF is leaving us, or we are leaving the IMF?
Morning all. Answer to your first question is yes. Answer to your second question is yes. Answer to your third question, yes. And the answer to your fourth question, yes.
So if you want to expand on your yes a bit.
What, you asked me the questions?
Did he ask 4 questions?
He asked 4 questions.
I wonder how he got the 4 questions.
He asked 4 questions in one.
Maybe. All right. So you're saying the budget for you tackled all the key areas.
All the questions that you asked me, the answer is what I got from it, according to the way you asked me.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so did the budget contain everything that a post-IMF budget will require? And you say yes. Why yes?
The guy say yes, you're asking.
Let me just backstep brief. Am I making this brief, or am I getting into the substance of the discussion?
So just along the lines of the other.
No, these two, their answers were elaborate.
Yeah, so
they were talking procurement, talking vegetation.
Because I want us to start taking area by area and analyzing them. So just do a brief one for me.
Overall, what I see is a well thought out directional budget. Okay, they've nicknamed the budget Impuntuo budget, which is a developmental budget, and I think that is what you can see, that the emphasis is clearly on how to develop various parts of the economy, the physical infrastructure, which will be roads, highways, and all that, including feeder roads, etc., etc. They've got IT infrastructure, well taken care of. Social infrastructure, which is well developed in the social support structures that they've put in place. And then they've got generally a whole approach towards having wind of the IMF. Now the question for the whole economy has got to be how do we build the deficit gap? Because we have a huge deficit funding gap, which we have proposed. 59 billion cedis worth of revenue coming in, 70-something cedis worth of expenditure, which we are going to take care of. So you've got quite a huge gap to fund. Doubtless, their intention has always been, now that we are out of the IMF, there are no restrictions on our ability to go out there and borrow on the open market, which means that they can see that they can fund that deficit gap. However, that deficit gap has been plugged or has been created temporarily by the support that they have had to give out to the banking sector, which is a huge chunk of the costs which we have incurred this year. It's still going on. You've got the DKM saga to come. There are other microfinance companies that definitely have to go down, and governments...
DKM saga to come. DKM saga, you mean?
The DKM saga.
I mean, but the minister said they've made about 80 or 90% of the payments already.
It is not the end of it.
It's not the end. The other people who lost their money with license, and you have to put good for the goose, good for the gander. You're gonna have to pay everybody.
Wow. But what? Okay, I don't want to.
But you see, if you take DKM as a text case example, third parties, independent capitalists have gone and duped some people. Government have stepped in to pay. Reason why they have stepped in to pay is say because we don't want the whole thing to collapse the industry. Fine. We, the taxpayer, should not be saddled with that bill. So somewhere along the line, government has to chase these people hard and bring the money back. So for now, we can accept that government is pre-financing the debt situation, the bad debt situation, but we expect that they'll collect that money back.
But the taxpayers certainly will have to bear part of it, because I'm not sure their assets will be enough to take care of the liabilities or the debt they left behind. So the taxpayer certainly will have to.
There will come a.
The government even has the political will to pursue everything.
There will come a point in time when government has to lay bare the books and say, out of the 1 billion that we paid up, we've been able to recover 600 million. The 400 million, there's nothing we can do because we can't trace it. Exactly what is going on with the Woyome thing now. All right, out of the 51 million, there isn't that much that we're going to get back from Woyome. All right, not for any other reason, but because he's a smart crook. It's as simple as that. All right, and you're going to find many other people like that. All right, but there's a responsibility on the persons who went and deposited their monies with the DKMs and all the others.
You also lose something.
All right, because
those deposits were not insured. The government has no business.
Out of greed, somebody comes and tells you, "I'll give you."
It was bad greed.
I'll give you 60% every month, or whatever you go, and you were warned by the central bank,
which is why they should.
That is that you know, keep your eyes wide open, and then you go and do it, and then you expect a bailout from government. So, in so many ways, those kinds of schemes, all right, have added to the huge deficit, because if you read the budget text, it keeps emphasizing most places that these costs and expenses are inclusive of arrears. All right, or 3 or 4 times in most of the projects it comes up. So there's a deficit gap, has to be financed. Fine. The point of the matter, all right, is that the economy has to grow. See, you cannot sit down and expect to stagnate a developing economy. There's so much that we need to do, and you and I have had that conversation before, frankly. When my argument has always been that there are so many things that you have to push on the front at the same time. All right? Yes, you can say, halt everything, let's sort out a debt to GDP ratio. Okay? You can say, okay, hold everything else, let's worry about fiscal ratios, revenue to cost ratios, and stuff like that. You can. But at the end of the day, all of these things are intertwined. And because they are intertwined, you need to push things at the same time in order to get it all done. Railways has to develop. You must have a railway line in an economy like ours. All right? We've had it before. There was a time when you could hop on a train from Accra to Kumasi with no problem. You could do Takwa to Takoradi and stuff like that. Do the coastal railway line from Akosombo all the way down. Now, you need that in order to be able to open up the rural economy and bring cheaper goods onto the markets. The problem with Ghana, which I have noticed, is that government can do as much as it wants with its policies and put things in place. It doesn't trickle down to the consumer. So whatever savings we make in transportation costs, in fuel costs and stuff like that, is not hitting the trotro market.
Cascade down.
It's sticky. It's very, very sticky. So irrespective of how hard governments try.
So why is it like that? So there's a relief from the top instead of it to trickle down to the ordinary man. So everybody gets the relief. It doesn't get to happen.
There's so many middlemen.
It's because we don't develop and we don't incur our expenses based on any data that is realistically possible. Take for example, recently the price of kinky has gone up. It's gone up at least 50%. Kinky that you were buying,
it will never come down.
It will never come down.
It will never come down. Ever.
It's gone up to 1 cedi 50 pesos, and yet we have a glut of maize on the market. All right, so you'd have expected that the maize that will come straight down into the urban sector will enable the capitalists who are operating the kinky markets will say, oh, there's plenty maize now. I'm buying the maize cheaper. So I'll drop the kinky price. But they're not competing with each other. The kinky woman in Osu market doesn't see the Labadi market woman as a competitor. She only sees the Osu people around her as a competitor. And they are all a clique. All right? They decide that they're going to raise the price, and everybody jacks up their price.
Oligopoly.
You see? So if you had a situation where you could have those market forces coming together, it would work. So and government, to a large extent, thinks it can fix it with the commodities markets thing. But it doesn't work like that. The commodities market will be more participated by the more affluent and opportunist people at the upper middle to the
information, right?
It all comes down to information.
And information is living on
you see, it comes down to information. So you have a problem in that regard. Even when you have fuel, oil price changes, and the retail markets, pump prices change. It doesn't reflect the transport fares. Okay, because they are not pegging their transport fares on that. They are pegging their transport fares on politics and unionization. That's how they are pricing. So we are, to a large extent, a very, very primitive.
So is there anything economy we can do about that? I mean, how do we improve that? How do we ensure that if there's a relief on the top, it affects the man at the base?
I think it will come when people start getting wealthier. And they want to try and protect their wealth. You see?
That looks like a long shot. I mean,
it will take a while to come. Yeah. If I remember clearly on one program.
What about your pet subject? Decentralized governance.
I'm coming to it.
But this is supposed to be your
this is my opening salvo. You are making me carry on. I remember once when this was pre-election in 2016, and we were talking about a few of the things that I think the MPP and another in particular was saying, and somebody asked me a question saying that, so how long do I think it will take? Because Donado has said they would be able to turn the economy around in about 4 or 5 years or something. And I came up and I said, no, you're going to need at least 10 years, all right, of consistent, pragmatic programs to start seeing the end result of this. One thing's for sure, let's get it very, very straight. If we don't fully decentralize this economy and make the municipalities responsible for their municipality, all right? And when we say responsible for the municipality in everything, you just don't want them to go and collect fares from the market, all right? And collect property taxes. If you look, one of the key things that government is going to try and do this time is to collect the money electronically from the market centers and collect on behalf of the municipalities. I had this discussion with somebody in authority, and I said, no, I don't like the idea that we are actually going to be doing this from the central point of view, and then
instead of the municipality,
then we devolve. It has to be done by the municipality. If they start taking responsibility for developing their areas, it will work. So that you can then now stop the MPs from taking a portion of the common fund, which is allocated specifically for development. Then you don't need a district assembly common fund. You can dissolve it. Because once you've decentralized and the municipalities are handling their own business, why therefore do they need somebody else to just sit somewhere and then allocate money to put into the account?
So did you see an intention of this decentralization in the budget as was read by the finance minister? Did you clearly see any such intention?
I think governments, and this government, is just flirting with the decentralization idea. It's a flirtatious relationship, all right? Until we get to the point where we actually get an act through Parliament that says categorically that from now on we are electing the DCs and the MCEs. Okay?
But that's
that's in the office.
It's coming in the office.
And it's been in the office for quite a while.
I can talk to you about the RTI bill that has been in the offing for a long time. But then we will digress.
Yeah. Or the PPP bill.
So
there are several.
let's not go there. This is something that need not now be coming. This is something that we should have done ages ago. Because I don't understand how people can't see, all right, that to have a smaller localized economy, which you can get your arms around, which you can manage and which you can coordinate, is not better than having a central one where nobody knows where the money goes to, nobody knows how the money is devolved. Okay? We are struggling, all right? And we are struggling because between your member of parliament, your district assembly chief, and your chief, your traditional chief, we don't know who is in charge.
Sydney, the only thing behind it is simply that politicians are afraid to cede economic control, because in doing so they will cede political control. That's just the whole problem.
And that's why we have to change it so that it is smaller.
Yeah.
All right, let the politics be more localized, and let them resolve their problems down there at that point, so we can make it work. Oh, by the way, George Ander is out of hospital.
Very well. Yeah, I read the
so we are all very, very grateful.
We thank God on his behalf that he's safe.
I thank the doctors at 37 for doing a good job. So my whole point is that irrespective of what criticisms we have of the budget and where we are going, the point of the matter is you cannot sit down and wait for IMF or World Bank or IDRC or whoever else has got money to come and dole it out and expect you to carry on. I like the mantra that we are putting across. A country without aid.
Ghana beyond aid.
Which means very clearly we have the resources. We need to use our own resources to develop ourselves, which is very, very clear. All right. Anybody who doesn't understand this simple idea, I think, is making a big mistake. And end of the day, if you have bauxite under your feet and you're not prepared to go and dig for it and sell it and get something better out of it, then you are an idiot. If you have gold, if you have diamonds, if you have timber, all of these things are available and you are not developing it and you are sitting down waiting, how do you think people like South Africa worked?
So
it's the gold.
But look at the issues that is sitting now. So what government is doing is that it is selling.
Let me take a few comments.
It is selling.
Go on.
It is selling the bauxite.
Let me
selling the
take
bauxite.
this. Thomas, why do you allow Kisley Hayford, an elderly man, to use unprintable words?
Like what?
Maybe idiots. Hashtag NDC Congress. All right. I agree. I agree with Franklin Kujo. Most of the successes put forward by the minister were generic in nature, not much specifics. But So Kiamofa again says Sydney on point on the issue of government policies not trickling down due to lack of data. We have two critical initiatives, Ghana Post GPS and the National ID. The two initiatives hold the key to getting the critical information needed to impact government policy. That's Amofa.
And he's absolutely right. Let's give Amofa some credit on this show. Every week, he comments.
Yes.
And he's absolutely right on this thing. And if I may, as part of my country, you see, this GPS and Ghana card ID thing and the tin, if we don't start using it effectively in order to be able to understand how economic activity moves around in the economy, we will never ever succeed. It is a pity that even up until this time that this GPS thing has been established, and even if it's not working completely, at least you can generate a GPS code. And banks and those financial institutions who are worried about tracing people should not be complaining about tracing people anymore. Because you can find anybody everywhere they are within a 4x4 square.
Yeah. But that's the challenge, Sydney. There's also a concern that the homeless are now borrowing IDs in order to address, which makes me think that the original thought for this GPS thing should have been landed property first. Before the digital.
But if I'm homeless, I could stand anywhere and generate an address, right?
Yeah, but
that's the challenge.
Yeah, but
I mean, but that's coming back.
Let's look at it from another point of view. Whatever GPS code I give you is the code I am telling you this is my address, isn't it? If I come to your house, and I come and borrow your GPS code, and I say this is my address, it is my responsibility. That is my address.
It's true.
If somebody is looking for me, they come and find me at your house. And if they come and I'm not there, I've perpetuated fraud.
But I could stand in front of your house and generate an address.
Yes, you can.
Well, let's use that as I think Sydney's point about the ID system, the GPS, is solid. I'm looking at the policy design, but it is neither here nor there really. It's a very important...
But you see, it's the same thing. If you go to the US, you go to the UK. I can go and take somebody's zip code or somebody's address code and put it on an address label and say, this is my address. If I use that on a legal document, all right, and then somebody finds out that I fraudulently misrepresented myself, that's a jail sentence you're facing.
That's true.
Okay?
Very well.
Basically, yes. The combination of these, I mean, there are issues in terms of implementation, I agree, but basically the combination of the GPS, the tin
and
this arrangement,
and the Ghana card.
When it's going to be implemented, and I'm aware of what's delaying it, is the best effort towards creating the framework for broadening the tax base.
Yes.
It's the best effort so far. And government is simply waiting. What I heard from Mr. Van is that they've been waiting to achieve a certain critical mass. I even did the story last week, before they start implementing it, because they don't want people to actually actively run away from registering TIN numbers. So
but even then, the processes of registering for the TIN itself has to be very easy.
Yes, so at least what they are doing right now is that you register and you're not immediately asked to pay anything. Because once you start paying, once they start demanding taxes, whether current or back, as you register, then people will stop registering.
There is
but now you can walk in and register and get a number, and you're not parting with any money immediately.
Yeah.
Which they encourage other people.
And there is emphasis in the budget this year about the use of the TIN.
The TIN, yes.
And it's absolutely critical because you see the financial institutions, all right, who are dominant and people depend on for everyday survival, have got to be the ones to lead the charge. That if I go to open a bank account with anybody, I should not be allowed to open it without a TIN. You go to the US, you can't open a bank account without a social security card. All right? You must have one. It doesn't mean that you're a citizen of the country. It simply means that you must have registered and be identified and be able to be seen when they are looking for you. So that has to be a sine qua non. So your TIN, your GPS, and your Ghana card, you must have those in order to be able to be, an economic aspirant in this country.
All right.
So Mr. Amofa, we thank you.
Okay. So a very quick one. I want to start with you Sydney again. I mean, we saw a lot of emphasis, and I mean, we will have to go to trade fair at some point in the program
to do what?
To carry on with the NDC Congress. We'll bring you live reports or maybe a live broadcast of that particular event. So you need to stay tuned to City TV and then City 97.3 FM for all your updates and news and analysis on the NDC Congress. But until then, we are having our budget discussion. So Sydney, I realized a lot of time was spent on the agri sector.
Yes.
You know, for obvious reasons. So now we have planting for food and jobs. There's a talk about rearing for food and jobs and aquaculture for food and jobs.
Yes.
Not surprising because we think that being an agrarian economy largely, we need to add value to our produce, feed our industries with it, etc., etc. But in a time that we had planted for food and jobs, you know, I was expecting that the growth in the agriculture subsector would have been greater than we've seen in the years, or would have been greater than any of the other subsectors. So, for example, in 2017, we saw a growth of 6.1%. First quarter of this year, 4.7%. The second quarter, 4.8%. Against industry, for example, industry made 15.7% in 2017, 10.4% in Q1, and 11.1% in Q2. You know, what did industry do differently that it did this well compared to agriculture, which had a lot of the emphasis and a lot of the money going into a whole program launched, planting for food and jobs, and we understand we have some food glut of a sort, etc. What changed? Why is this not reflecting
the simple answer? Investment? The simple answer to your question before I start getting elaborate is that monkeys play in sizes. You see, monkeys play in sizes. An ounce of gold is a lot of money when you compare it to an agricultural field. All right, when somebody's growing tomatoes, you probably need about 200 acres of, and I'm not using this as a scientific calculation, just to make a point. You probably need about 200 acres of land to grow the equivalent of 1 ounce of gold. All right? So when you're in a sector like the industrial sector, which includes mining, includes quarrying, includes industrialization, includes the oil and gas sector, etc., it is easier for them to show improvement in growth. If you have development in the 10 fields where Sankofa field has come on stream and gas has been found, it'll improve the GDP of that sector far bigger and easier than it would in the agri sector.
Okay, that makes
so
sense.
That's the interpretation of those numbers. The agricultural sector growth and improvement has been, for me, incredible. All right, and I'm a bit skeptical as to whether those numbers are actually totally right or
because
not.
they are too good.
Yes, because they are too good. I don't have a basis for saying what I'm saying, but this is just me. I'm thinking aloud, because it just seems to me that in 1 year of doing the planting for food and jobs, the Minister for Agri came and said that we have stopped importation of maize, and we've been able this year to produce all the maize that we need, and that's the disconnect. If we have produced more maize than we need, why is the price of thinking going up?
Some of the figures the Agri Minister, for example, Chen South, we heard, or he told us that the planting for food and jobs, for example, produced about 745,000 jobs.
Yes.
And I mean, we just don't understand or don't know where those jobs are. People think that these were things that people were doing already. Anyway.
Well, have we gone to go and ask him?
He said he has the figures.
He says he has the basis.
And people have said that, because he said the program, consisted of about 387 or so hectares of land. And if you are to get 2 people each engaged on the farm, that will bring you to that figure. So it doesn't appear as if they are hard figures, but they are figures he estimated, and that is supposed to be hard figures. And so you're talking about the glut in maize, for example. We don't feel it, but that is what he has said.
Well, but you see, with analysis like that, there has to be an anchor point which is accurate and factual and verifiable in order for you to be able to build all the rest of your analogies. And
it's curious the finance minister in naming or listing or stating the jobs created. He didn't talk about that 745,000 jobs. He did.
Yeah, he mentioned that the agri sector says they've created that. So. Yeah.
But it makes sense.
But he even makes
if you divide 745,000 by 2, and you get 300 and 47,000.
I think the challenge is about the data. The data.
Yeah, it's husband and wife and one child. You know, you can be cynical. If you look at it that way, cynicism will tell you that somebody's making up some numbers somewhere. All right,
that's what I think.
But end of the day, there's also an agricultural census which is supposed to be going on, which has not been completed. It's been halted somewhere. It started and we don't know, and that is supposed to estimate the number of small little agricultural farms that we are growing in our backyards. Who is doing half an acre of tomatoes or some small maize patch or something, and all that is part of the development of the whole thing. But you see, the thing is this. The problem with our agriculture is not that we can't grow the food. We can't process the output.
Yes.
You see, let's look at the fruit juices area as an example. We import a lot of fruit juice from South Africa, especially, and also now these days from the UAE and all those
Dubai,
other places.
Areas, yeah.
But if you look at it, what is missing in our value chain, okay, as we go forward, is we cannot package our produce and we're not selling it locally, and we're not selling it outside either. There should be no reason why we should be doing importation of mango juice. We shouldn't. Why are we importing ginger concentrate? Why are we importing tomato puree? Why are we importing watermelon juice, etc., etc., etc.? For every single item in this country that we can grow,
we import.
Reason we cannot package it.
Value addition.
Absolutely.
But when we try to, we can't be competitive. Look at Blue Skies, for example.
Yes.
We can't be competitive both locally and internationally. It's just that we're not. For some reason, we don't seem to be trying to do it.
Blue Skies, our problem was clearly the supply side. Blue Skies couldn't get enough raw material to be able to continue to supply on order. So it had to keep bringing in from the likes of Ivory Coast. Commander Sugar Factory can't operate because we don't have enough sugar here. Falugu Tomato Factory is the same. Wenchi is the same.
So once we know all of this and we want to have this coordinated approach to development, where we have a one district, one factory, the idea is that these should be able to link it.
So, right? So I think it goes back to the decentralization idea.
Yes.
I mean, we should have a master plan of how we intend to integrate all these
because
things.
I eat lolobi rice.
There is a master plan.
Rice?
I mean, we grow rice. Okay. We should be able to.
Oh, if you want to talk about rice, we'll go into a different direction. I'm a rice miller.
Okay,
that's what I do for my life. All right, I mill rice. Okay, and it's the same problem you have. You never have enough supply to be able to meet the demand. So we are still importing a huge amount of rice into the economy because there's a market. There's a complete separation between your demand and supply. The gap is huge. But let's not talk about that. Let's concentrate. Let's focus on what I'm saying. You see, what you need is to have factories to make the packaging.
Yes.
And we don't have that. So your expectation is that banks, if they were progressive banks, instead of doing treasury bill banking, they would look for opportunities and where people are coming forward with ideas of how we could industrialize. Why are we in a situation in this country where we don't still have a paper mill? We don't have a paper mill, but we have lots of forest.
Yeah.
And we can regenerate the forest. We grow eucalyptus trees here. We grow all kinds of other trees that are needed for producing paper, and we're not doing it. And if you don't have a paper industry, you can't have a packaging industry.
Well, let's hope that...
You see? Yes. So all of those things, the problem, the constriction, when you look at it, is in the financial institutions. If the financial institutions opened their eyes and were dedicated to ensuring that we could move the economy forward, they would provide a lot more money into the critical sectors. And that's what, frankly, you are saying. Where and why is it not happening? Reason why it's not happening is that the banks are not prepared to put money in the right places. They would rather finance the importation of sugar and wheat and flour
that's
and
quick,
all those
that's
because it's a quick
return.
turnaround.
Yeah.
Trade financing is their business, not
Very well.
development and industrial
I want
financing.
to take one buffalo whilst Tuma comes in.
I'd like to.
But Tuma, I want you to deal with the issue about infrastructure. You can answer. You can make a comment on what he said. How do you deal with the issue of infrastructure? It appeared to me when I listened to the finance minister that a lot of infrastructure projects have been mentioned in the budget, and indeed, like the reference Franklin made to Pius when he was here the last time. He said in 2019 there'll be a lot of infrastructure projects. Everywhere you go, you hear sounds of carpenters and masons, working because government will be investing a lot in that area.
Then your people will be singing a lot of songs.
Okay. So, but the point I'm making is a lot of these infrastructure projects appear to be hinged on the Sino-Hydro deal. Yes. And I'm getting worried, or I don't know if I should be. Do you think that we are banking our hopes too much on this Sino-Hydro money?
Okay. Well, let me first of all...
And what would that mean for the plans? Should that
go sour?
Yes.
Well, okay. First of all, let me just quickly add on to what Sydney said, okay? In terms of the issue about the banks. Yeah, but you see, you must understand where the banks too are coming from. Look, right now, non-performing loans for the banking sector is at a long-term high. Now, look at the structure of the bad and doubtful debts of the banks. The indigenous private sector is easily the biggest defaulter on bank loans by a long way. So now you're asking the banks to lend medium to long term for indigenous enterprises to tool up for things like fruit juice. Don't forget, the banks is people's money they are dealing with, it's not their own money. Their first priority is to protect depositors' money. And you're asking them to lend to people who are renowned for defaulting, even on 90-day loans. Don't talk about 2-year, 3-year loans. They don't even have the long-term deposits in the first place. How many deposits have you seen which are more than 1 year? So there are constraints. Yeah. All right. First of all, the indigenous entrepreneurial class has to do better. And two, we need to develop a market for at least corporate bonds, because people are you can't use deposit money to fund these long-term projects all the time because you don't have long-term deposits. So that's just an aside. I agree with what Sidney was saying, but it's not that the banks are just reluctant to. They are respecting depositors' monies. It doesn't make good business right now to lend medium term to indigenous enterprise. Anyway,
so
compare with the options. Now to infrastructure. Yes, we're relying a lot on Sino-Hydro.
And is that danger?
The danger I'm talking about is generally but not the Sino-Hydro. The Sino-Hydro, I think, is a very, very good deal. Because it amounts to, simply what we are doing. Look, when the opposition says, is it debt or that, it is not debt. We are simply selling the bauxite while it's still in the ground. Because we can't bring it out ourselves. And we need the money. So we have simply told the Chinese, okay, you guys say you can bring it out. We are giving you access to bring it out. You will give us this. You understand? So it's not, I don't see how that becomes, how is it debt?
It's a sale.
It's a sale. It's simply a sale. Simply a sale.
I'll make some comments on that.
Okay. However, my worry about the Sino-Hydro, one is, okay, let's assume the Chinese can access the bauxite and the infrastructure going on. They are said, we need to know some of the terms for these things. Look, will the Chinese be in control of the infrastructure, and for how long? For example, let's assume under the agreement we have with Sino-Hydro, for example, they are building a road from here to here. Are they going to be given the authority to tour the road? And for how long?
Yeah.
For example, we don't even know whether we are going to have access costs to the infrastructure being built.
No, but if
government is not telling us anything,
bauxite in the ground,
yes,
why should they pay? What payment again do we have to give them?
We don't know. Let government come out and tell us. That's what I'm saying.
Let me help. We've read the
Come on,
agreement.
you haven't seen the document.
You've
That's
not
why.
seen the document.
Okay.
The document that went to Parliament,
Yes.
which the NDC erroneously thought was a loan.
A loan.
We said it wasn't a loan, but you need a loan to unlock that deal.
Okay.
For the reason being that, you see, the Chinese are not necessarily interested in your bauxite. They are interested in getting paid. There's a 3-year moratorium.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
So you go for the amount. Make sure you keep 8% of the whatever amount you get at each point in time. Because for now there's an 80 million facility, which is, I think is the first off-taker of So keep 8% into an escrow account that you and the Chinese would have to agree on to be liquid. Now you should be able to process your bauxite. You can still do it with the Chinese. But the agreement, when you read it carefully, doesn't suggest that the Chinese necessarily have to do the processing of the aluminum.
There are different companies who are bidding.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
To mine. To mine the bauxite.
So where's the Chinese? Where's Sinohydro getting comfort?
No, so Sinohydro
they
just you need money from them, and so that they just have to give you the money. So
as a loan.
As a loan.
Oh.
So what it is that per the agreement, after the 3rd year, you really have to start paying. But
you have to start paying for the loan.
For the loan, whatever amount you get.
Sinohydro is giving us bridging finance pending when the
more or less
bauxite
like
start generating money.
That's a good explanation.
So when when you say it's a bauxite barter deal, in actual fact, it is really not, because fact of the matter is that the Sinohydro
is a loan guaranteed by bauxite.
Exactly.
By bauxite
so the question
sales.
you're asking, whether the Chinese will be manning these roads and the rest, I don't think that will happen at all. They are only interested in we bill for you, you pay us back.
And I can see why the opposition too is
but the challenge is this.
It's a self-amortizing loan.
Yeah, the challenge though is this. Because you'd have to start processing your bauxite enough to make enough money. Already the average we have is about, I think, $80 million a year. I think $180 million a year. Our estimate shows that you need about $1 billion to be able to produce the amount of bauxite to unlock the entire $2 billion loan. So you need to start the process, but you also need a mitigation plan. Some of us really think that if we need to go through all this wahala, let's just go and raise some bonds somewhere and get on with it. So that's the thing. You set up an escrow account.
Except that this is the cheapest. This is the cheaper way.
And this will create more job for the people in the area too.
Very true.
In terms of the value addition to the diamond. So I see in the allocations for special initiatives like this, for example, in the budget, some 19 million cedis has been allocated for the Ghana International Bauxite and Aluminium Development Authority. So my thinking is that this is in line with this Sinohydro or bauxite mining matter. But so did you finish with your point on infrastructure?
No.
So quickly, let me bring it.
No, it's the same thing that they are trying to design. We are a large contributor to cocoa. Then you've got shea butter, which is supposed to be cocoa, shea, and coffee. But we are doing more on the cocoa, and we don't do anything about the shea butter and the coffee. And then you've got other industrialization management units. All right. So you see, all those things, for me, they are just an unnecessary addition to the cost of producing all of these things. But they believe that they need
the authority,
the authority to be able to manage it. So,
so back to infrastructure. Okay, apart from the Sinohydro, we're going to use about 1 billion from the next Eurobond issue, which is up to 3 billion for infrastructure as well. And of course, there's the 1.5 billion for education infrastructure. Okay, I mean, we all know that Ghana needs infrastructure, right? Now, what's happening now?
But what type of infrastructure?
That's one issue. Before you came, I spoke about it. It's social intervention kind of stuff, which will not generate, which are not going to generate repayment money. You understand? You know, I mentioned that actually before you came. I emphasized that's one big danger.
Why are you emphasizing it
before you came? Before I came. So you want the people to know that I was late?
No, not that. Because I'm trying to explain. I've already explained.
I was listening to you in the car when I was coming.
Okay. Well, I've already explained that part of it. Now, the other issue is that, you see, my big worry is the foreign. I said before too, the foreign exchange exposure. Now, all this infrastructure we are doing, okay, even if we are charging economic rates on access to the economic infrastructure, the social infrastructure already is going to be a better. It's going to be, we've established that. Now, even the economic infrastructure, the fact is that when you are borrowing, we are borrowing from abroad to do economic infrastructure, which in most cases is going to be the returns come in cedis, okay. So it gives us foreign exchange obligations exposure, all right? And just like the previous government, what's really happened is that we are just hoping, where do we get our foreign exchange from? Basically, it's from primary exports sales, all right? I think basically we are hoping that as oil production increases, government gets a bigger take on foreign exchange, and we're going to use that to service these bigger foreign exchange obligations. And I've been saying that the problem is that it's not working out as well as we thought, which is why there's been so much pressure on the cedi, despite the fact that we have a merchandise trade surplus. You understand? The last time we did this kind of issue of borrowing heavily in forex to fund local infrastructure, the biggest single loan was potentially a game changer in our favor. That was the gas infrastructure thing.
Yeah.
And yet, we're still having this current pressure on the city due to debt servicing problems. Right now, I'm not seeing the new borrowing coming in that has that kind of game-changing project in terms of saving us foreign exchange. All right? So what will happen is that it puts more pressure on the cedi in terms of foreign exchange that is going on. Please let me just round up. I'm almost finished. Which is going on. And that is my bigger worry. All right? It's not just the fact that we are about to go back to being to borrowing inordinately in terms of the volume, but there's also the currency issue, which is going to end up putting pressure on the cedi, further pressure on the cedi. Because already, don't be deceived, the foreign exchange, the debt repayment obligations we are incurring, which we incurred during the Mahama administration, for example, and the early 2 years of the current administration, is now really beginning to tell on our foreign exchange position.
Very well.
It's very different from what like 3 years
I want him to make a point and to put everything together. Understandable, you're speaking a lot because this appears to be your 40. I mean, Sydney is a policy, Franklin is a policy guy. But, you know, frankly, we always hear that, so for example, infrastructure will ensure the economy grows, people have money in their pockets, etc. Can you do the connection for me? How does, for example, the building of roads put money in like a teacher's pocket or a pastor's pocket or, in a doctor's pocket? If I were a construction person, yes, I can understand. How does government engaging in infrastructure put money in the pockets of the citizenry?
I'll give you an example.
Don't forget to talk about Mohammed's policy, Mohammed's philosophy.
Which one is that?
He said if he builds the road and it's taking you less time to go from A to B, then that money that you're going to be spending buying fuel is in your pocket.
Okay, very well.
That's a good one. On a day that he's so afraid. Anyway, this is an exciting question, and I think that Sydney has partially answered the question. See, I try to answer it this way with an example. So, as we speak, a tuber of yam is almost priced at 7 pesos.
You do a lot of, you do well with your, how do I say it? Your grocery
anecdote. You remember the Nido?
The Nido matter.
The Nido matter. No. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. So 7 pesos per tuber.
Cedis. That's a small tuber.
No, not in Accra.
Okay.
In Krachi.
Okay.
You know, I mean, interesting. I was in some village in the Volta region some time ago, and I bought coconut. 2 cities. I had about 4. I couldn't even eat.
What
all.
village was
in
this?
Krachi.
Some village in the Ketu area. I've forgotten the name. We have to travel deep down. And I came to Accra the following week. And coconut was 2 cities, 50 pesos.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's finish this thing quickly before you carry on. Go to Takoradi. Go to Takoradi now. You can buy a coconut at less than 30 pesos.
But when it comes to Accra, it's
1 cedi 50
right.
pesos.
That's the inefficiency of our.
That's the inefficiency of the market. And there are arbitrage opportunities there, except that you can't get into it.
The young farmer is getting 7 pesos in Krachi, but you are buying it at 7 cedis in Accra. Simple reason is that the transportation system makes it difficult to keep prices at the barest minimum. I mean the markups, which makes me think. And this is a suggestion from a friend of mine who's been running the Volta Lake Transport Company, Martin. The analysis is that if the yams were transported on the lake, it was going to cost 10 pesos.
Okay.
So by the time it gets down south, give or take another 20, 30, let's say even 1 cedi.
So that's 1 cedi, 70 pesos.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it by road, you have all these challenges. So I'm trying to answer your question with this evidence that if you build the infrastructure on the Volta Lake, which is virtually dead right now, if you actually fix that, you save money from the 7 cities, you save a substantial, if not 4 cities, of 7 cities per tuber of yam that you buy in Accra. That is savings for you. So if you invest in infrastructure, be it rail or proper roads, and yam should not go by roads because our roads are not built to handle these type of cargo.
Should go by rail.
Or should go by rail or go by
the
lake.
Train.
The lake is even better because Krachi all the way down south, and the lake you don't construct anything else except to build.
But see, frankly, let me point out one thing. I totally agree. I always say that look, there's no developed economy in the world that does not have a proper railway system. There's no developed economy in the world that does not have a proper railway system.
Which is what I was trying. Which is where I was trying to interrupt you many times. So,
however,
when you are done, let me come in.
However,
SkyTrain.
However, we should also point out the fact that yes, that why the transportation system or its inadequacy also raises costs. The bigger problem is just the issue of middlemen. What? Melcom.
Yes.
Melcom is regarded as one of the most price competitive retail chains in Ghana. They have a policy that wherever their shops are, same price. All right? Because they handle their own distribution from here to wherever they are, they're able to maintain same price. So that should tell you that the bigger problem is the middleman, not the transport cost per se. The transport cost is important, but the much bigger problem is the middleman thing. Melk has removed the middleman thing by doing his own distribution to his branches, and is able to maintain same prices all countrywide.
But Simi initially alluded to the fact that it's an inefficiency of the system. I was asking him,
correct.
Yeah, how we could correct that.
But I think it's even a bigger, even bigger issue than the lack of efficiency of our transportation system.
USAID commissioned a very, very important study about 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. All right? And it was to do with how they could mitigate the transportation costs from Tema all the way up through to Burkina Faso along the line. Okay? And part of the whole idea was to incorporate the Volta Lake in the whole scheme of things. The benefit of the Volta Lake is you go upstream to the north, you spend power because you have to fuel the barge. When you get there, you're coming back, you float the barge down. So even the very cost of the fuel alone is half price to start off with. But let's just get one thing straight. You see, in this modern world, and in the way in our culture, where we like carrying things to and from village to urban city center, what you need is a railway system that actually works. Because you cannot go and put all those heavy yam tubers and all the plantain and the cocoa yam and whatever you're carrying on an aeroplane. If you have a good railway line which carries significant cargo, you'll be able to carry these things backwards and forwards without a problem. If you look at the railway design, you go and talk to the minister or anybody heavily involved in it now. The way the design is absolutely right. See, it's like a Y scheme. You start from the bottom and then it branches off to the various urban producing centers. If you have that, all this nonsense about having airports at Ho and here and here and here and here and there, you don't need it for internal domestic travel. So for your domestic internal travel, get the railway system working. And then you do your interconnection with the West African states by air.
Very well.
So you have your Tamale, you have your Western region, you have your Eastern region, you have your South. Then you are fine. All right?
Very well.
But this whole thing that we're trying to emphasize, the transport network and the middleman operations will only go away when there is intense competition in people trying to develop their routes from the growing sectors to the consuming sectors.
All right, very well. So I want us to move this.
You want to go to you want to go to trade fair
before we are prompted to go to trade fair. We see the issue about raising revenue, and in doing this we have compliance, and we have perhaps new ways that the government wants to introduce or they want to introduce to raise revenue. The issue about compliance has come up. So I remember in the media budget we heard about things like VAT attack or VAT police or something to people who go around to ensure that there's that enforcement. As a seller by the street, compliant as a taxpayer, how does my possession of a tin make me pay taxes? Is it that the tax which they are not doing yet, or this is how it's going to be? What was the connection?
I think the question you asked is a combination of identifying people properly in the system, and then people actually yielding to their responsibility as tax-paying citizens, more or less. I think it is important that once you are engaged in any business of sorts, you should pay a tax. I mean, that is not in contention at all. So the thing is essentially to say, look, you are an economic agent, of course, you are an economic agent. Something ought to identify you, right? Because presumably you still have to go to the bank and do a transaction here, I think it's important that once you're an economic agent, you yourself make it your aim to pay a tax. For me, I don't see. I think the connection you are trying to find out is not necessarily. I think what
you're trying to say that just having a tin is not
just having
doesn't make any difference.
Some real connection.
Yeah, but you need to identify. Once you identify the
after identification, what else? So, for example, saying that free SHS people, before you access some services like free SHS or even NHIS, you must come with a tin number.
Yes. Yes.
How does a kid?
It's not a kid. It's not a kid.
It's not the kid.
Why should the kid suffer?
Because the kid will grow up to become a parent one day.
So the kid must have it.
Yes. So right from the very beginning, you identify the kid off from the birth and deaths register. Once he is recorded as a human being, all right, in society, then you want to give him a number. That number will follow.